Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Cinema A to B. Alec, today we're going to discuss Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, directed by Gil Keenan, written from a script with him and Jason Reitman, who did Afterlife. Why don't you kick us off on this? Wow, we're up to what, the fourth entry in the Ghostbusters franchise? Just kind of hard to believe.
Of this universe, because technically there's 5, isn't there now? Because
we're not going to discuss the
2016 version.
No.
I don't blame you. And actually, it's because of 2016 that I didn't watch Afterlife when it came out. I was kind of done. I was like, Ghostbusters is only 2 movies in going forward. And so when we decided to talk about Frozen Empire, I actually said, well, I should probably sit down, watch Afterlife, because I know this is a sequel. So I did. We watched them pretty much back to back. I got to say, Frozen Empire just doesn't have the same emotional beats, the same interesting story as Afterlife. I'm going to tell you, this is going to be kind of a little bit of both, but I was really impressed with Afterlife. I thought it was a really great movie. I love the family dynamic. I love the more serious tone of it. And I felt like it didn't rely too much on nostalgia and callbacks and all that, where unfortunately I felt Frozen Empire really was a lot about that. It was a lot of callbacks. It was a lot of nostalgia to kind of bring you along. And it tried to do some of that family dynamic, but just not nearly as interesting or not nearly as engaging as the first movie. And we spend, and honestly speaking, the most, in my opinion, the most interesting person in the entire movie, both of them, is McKenna Grace as Phoebe. She's fantastic, like both as an actor as well as the character she brings to life. Like I really can feel her being kind of a Spangler. Like, I mean, she is truly Egon's granddaughter. Like it feels that way. Like this is great. And while obviously the movie follows her along the way, how do I really put it, is it puts her in situations that are not either interesting or kind of tries to sideline her in just dumb ways, or just kind of MacGuffin ways of why this can't work, or just doesn't feel really right. And I feel like this movie is trying to be Ghostbusters 2 in a lot of ways with its baddie and some of its other callbacks. It just doesn't work. Or it's not that it doesn't work. It's not a terrible movie, but it definitely didn't draw me in like the first one. There is a lot of failings in this, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Frozen Empire versus Afterlife, I think, is a worthy discussion. Afterlife is a beautiful film, tribute piece. So here's kind of what I think the problem is. I think Afterlife is a wonderful closure sequel to Ghostbusters 1 and 2, and I don't fault the filmmakers for this. What they've decided to do with making Egon's granddaughter like the central character and the Spanglers, it's a good way to give closure to the first 2 movies. It's really kind of boxed them in a really bad way to try to extend the franchise out further. Mm-hmm. They're just not that interesting. And then the fact that they made the decision to bring all those side characters that were based out of Oklahoma, and it's
back.
Like,
yeah,
I was like, I can deal with the central core family being there, right? Mm-hmm. So Rudd, Callie Spangler, Finn, McKenna Grace, but now I've got, I've got Podcast that's there. It's like, oh, well, and Podcast moved to New York, and Lucky moved to New York, and we're gonna throw. I love James Acaster as a comedian, but why?
Yeah.
There are so many characters in this movie. I'll tell you what it's like watching. This is like watching the Ghostbusters version of Cobra Kai.
Totally get it. Yes.
It feels
100%.
like a TV. It feels like a TV show, and I'm not the first to say this. There's been some pretty high profile reviews that have come to the same conclusion, that the sheer number of cast and crew or cast of characters in this film is more indicative of a series than a feature film. And how they thought that they could bring this many characters in and juggle them and have it make any sense at all is beyond me. The script is a dumpster fire. And I'm going to disagree with you. I think this movie is terrible.
Okay. All right.
I think this movie is awful.
Okay.
I think the only thing that the movie had going for it, they totally wasted, which was the kind of old god demon they had was kind of interesting. And then the fact that they had, this descendant with this ability to help fight it was kind of interesting. They waited until there were 10 minutes left in the movie to reveal any of that.
Yep.
The movie just drags on. Finn's hunting Slimer for some reason. I don't know why. And does Slimer come and help them later? No. Wasted opportunity. And then you have this side story with Phoebe, with McKenna, with the other ghost girl. And they set that up okay, but it felt like a TV show. That felt like a TV narrative. For a film set in New York, it feels awfully small.
Yeah. And honestly, I would have felt like it was better if it stayed in Oklahoma, or anywhere else. New York again felt like too on the nose of let's do a callback. And, I know that's where they're from, but it's why are we don't need to do this.
Well, and it suffered. Its final act suffers from the same gripe I have with Ghostbusters 2. And I like Ghostbusters 2, but the fact that the final showdown in Ghostbusters 2 is inside that really relatively small room in that art museum makes the movie feel small. And the final battle feels unimportant. It doesn't have any gravity. I mean, in the first film, they're on a high-rise rooftop. It works. It feels pretty big. The third film, they're down in that almost like a catacomb, but it's a pretty big space in the mountain. That felt kind of large. They're back to they're in the firehouse. Yeah, and it felt so small and so unconsequential that they made the firehouse like this. Because the first movie was the big, where the containment unit got let loose. Now they've decided that this is this spiritual focal point. It's anytime in these movies where you take things like big battles and then put them in small rooms, it feels so meh. Yeah. And this movie's just meh. And then the other problem is if you're gonna go really serious, which Afterlife was, and it worked, and you're going to do a tribute movie, beautiful tribute to the late Harold Ramis, then please, for the love, just make this thing the funniest thing it can be. And it's not. No. It's super self-important, very serious. It's almost entirely humorless.
And yeah, Afterlife was a lot funnier than this was.
And the fact that you put Acaster in a really serious, just assistant scientist role is making me scratch my head. I don't know if you've seen any of his stand-up. No, it's very good. And so it's man, I don't know. I don't know if this was what was supposed to be the reboot team. I'm like, no, no.
It was good for one, but not for many.
It was it was Afterlife wrapped everything up really neatly. But I don't know how you can take Finn and McKenna and a couple other of them and expect me to think that that's the next generation of Ghostbuster. That doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. It worked in that movie on its own, but just throwing them in New York and making me expect that Rudd is running the Ghostbusters is I don't know. I don't have a good answer for this. I feel like they just should have stopped after Afterlife is kind of what my argument is. That was a beautiful way to cap off the legacy. And then I don't know what you do after. I don't know where you go.
No. Different direction is what you really need to do. Don't make it New York, especially because they talked in Afterlife about how the fact that the Ghostbusters kind of stopped being a thing because they had captured all the ghosts and kind of here it is. I mean, I understand them maybe moving back, but was there really a need for Ghostbusters in New York? Obviously this story makes it so, but it doesn't seem like the way Afterlife has it is that New York is pretty much clean of ghosts after Ghostbusters. That's why they broke.
They even got kind of uncreative. I said I'm kind of going to contradict myself because I did like a little bit of the lore of the ancient kind of demon god thing, but they even kept it in the same. I believe like Gozer was supposed to be like a Sumerian god, and I'm pretty sure they kept that part the exact same. And I'm like, well, wouldn't it have been more interesting if it was like Chinese? Like an ancient Chinese demon, and now now you can do these little fun homages to Big Trouble in Little China. Like, I mean, at least mix it up. Like, and if you're gonna do that, maybe now move it to San Francisco or something, or LA. I don't know, or just somewhere different. Like, it just felt stale in every possible way.
Yeah. I think some of it too could be, I know Jason Reitman was one of the, kind of helped write it, but I wonder what it could have been had he was also directing it. Like, would there have been more care put in? Would there have been changes to some of the acting or emotional beats? What made Afterlife so much better than this? Or why did he not want to direct this?
Or I'll tell you what would have been really interesting is if you would have just taken Rudd and the Spangler, daughter and her kids, just those four, and maybe one Ghostbuster, like maybe either Ernie Hudson or just Dan Aykroyd, and no one else from the first movie, and you have some good reason that they go somewhere like London, bust ghosts in London and do something really cool there, and then you leave the possibility for doing like an offshoot with a fresh crew in New York down the line with comedic actors much more in line with what made the first movie work so well. Because this family dynamic busting ghosts is just really clunky. It just feels weird. It almost contradicts, like, I don't even feel like Callie Spengler, the daughter, like, her busting ghosts seems out of character. Yeah. Like, it makes no sense to me. Like, I could see her hanging back by the firehouse while Rudd and like the kids maybe do it, or just Rudd and McKenna. And then there's two more. Cause even Finn's character, Trevor, doesn't seem like he's wants
into it.
No, it's like you have two characters that don't even seem written to really want to do that. I don't know. I need to stop because I just don't have a whole lot of good things to say about this movie. I mean, it looks good. Like, I don't have any complaints with how it appeared.
And overall the editing is fine. Like, there was no standout moments where I was like, oh, this was edited really poorly, but also there wasn't anything that amazing. CGI was okay. Going back, honestly, for me, both the library ghost and Slimer felt like it wasn't needed. Like, we could have let's just not. And this really, I think it needed 15, 20 minutes taken off. Like, you really didn't need some of this stuff. And there were so many decisions made by the characters that just made me go, why are we doing this? Or why, like Ernie Hudson's, his little like, why wouldn't you have so many battery backups, generator backups, or all these different things in place if you're gonna keep ghosts out of the containment, where they can just, if something goes offline, they can just peace out. Like, how, I don't know. Just, it's one of those where it's like, I know a lot of dumb decisions get made in real life, but sometimes I'm just like, you have smart people making really, really dumb decisions, which is probably true, but it doesn't feel always right in movies. It throws me out of like, they would have not done X, they would not have done Y. But I don't know. It's one of those. It failed to engage me. And some of it obviously was watching Afterlife literally right before this and loving that and thinking it was great. And this just comes off as a typical kind of sequel, like a cash grab for money of like, hey, we made a good amount of money on the first one. Let's do it again. And I mean, and they made almost the same amount of money the budget was a little bit more on Frozen Empire than it was on Afterlife, but they made a little bit less in box office than Afterlife.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of scratch my head when you cast Patton Oswalt as just kind of this throwaway, almost like a cameo.
Yeah.
As this doctor that helps you kind of figure out some of the lore. When I'm thinking Patton's like as much of a spiritual successor as an comedic actor to like Dan Aykroyd as I could probably come up with.
Mm-hmm.
So why wouldn't you use this movie as like a handing of the baton in a way to introduce a core group? Because how many Ghostbusters you have Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, you had Ramis, Ernie Hudson. So is it just 4?
It was just 4 unless you count Rick Moranis. But
yeah, so you would have had the potential for 5. So if you kept Rudd and McKenna, then you've got 3 more slots that you can fill. And so you could fill them with Patton. You could do this James Acaster that I've said is capable of being really funny. And then, a third that it almost feels, for a while I thought they were going to use the guy that plays Nadeem. Was it Kumail?
Oh yeah. Kumail. Yeah.
When you do that though, you're going to have to find ways to eliminate the OG Ghostbusters.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that they brought them back again was like, why? They did nothing. Like literally Bill Murray did nothing. Like came in, they're like, oh, thank God you're here. and they get as stuck as they would have been had he not showed up.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It was just that stupid nostalgia of just, hey, let's bring this in so we get that kind of the thing I always rail against anyways. It's fan service when it needs to not be. This movie's full of it, and all it does is just add fluff or detract from the story. With not that there was a great story to begin with this, but yeah, they needed to kind of.
Afterlife felt like the last movie that you should have seen
with
the OG crew, except Ernie Hudson. If you're going to make him the financier, which is what they've kind of created, he's like the wealthy one.
Yeah. He
should be the only one and he sparingly should show up. He should show up as much as like M does in the Bond films. Just at the beginning.
Yep.
Here's your mission set. And like,
this is what you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that.
I think this movie's torn too much between the past and the future. And it wasn't willing to move the ball forward. No. Like it wasn't willing to make those tough decisions to basically say, probably don't need Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd in this. Like,
well, I mean, and I felt like in Afterlife, they were the right amount. Like it was mostly a story about the other characters. And then it was just like quick moment with Dan Aykroyd. And then, hey, at the end, again, a good send off. They don't need to be part of the entire story or part of this life. They've taken a step back.
Yeah, I thought that was the whole point of this, is trying to get this thing loosely rebooted so that they can continue to make movies. But they've really, I don't see how that's going to happen now. No,
it just didn't do well enough. And also, I think this tarnished the, Paul Rudd and not Paul Rudd, but like basically the Spengler family, kind of their chances of getting their own but their own additional sequel without having to have the OG 3. Yeah, I agree. It just felt really small. It feels like kind of a quick cash grab. Like, oh, hey, like we did pretty well on the first one. Let's try to bank off of this and just move forward without really giving it a whole lot of thought.
Yeah, you can just tell Jason Reitman like spent a long time crafting the script for Afterlife to make sure that it was like not just a good story, but honored, the films that had come before it. And this clearly seems to me that it was written under a much faster deadline. I don't know. It feels like they got kind of stuck on where to go. And so I feel like the franchise is stuck. I think it's mired and it's not willing to let go of these original actors that are now like well into their 70s, some of them pushing 80. So it's like,
you're not going to have much time with them.
No. By the way, Ernie Hudson, man, looks fantastic.
He did. He was still in good shape, man. I don't know what else to really say too much about this. Like didn't really like it. And obviously coming from someone who usually likes the first in a trilogy anyways, this, I don't think is going to be a trilogy. And the reason is the second movie just didn't have that spark, just didn't have that interest. I
can't even put this on the level of Ghostbusters 2. I mean, I like Ghostbusters 2.
But was it better than Ghostbusters 2016?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know. Because Ghostbusters 2016, my gripe with that was they didn't let the actresses do their thing. Mm-hmm. Like improv the way they needed to. The cast was perfect for an all-female Ghostbusters reboot. They could not have cast it better, and it didn't feel like they let those gals do their thing from an improvisation standpoint. So yeah, that was my complaint with that. I didn't think the script was super problematic. It was a real simple story, but it made sense. It was coherent. So I don't know. In some ways, the 2016 movie is probably more watchable to me than this thing is.
Yeah, it did feel very reined in, very much.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
Oh, well, I guess that wraps us up. So, well, we want to thank everybody for giving us a listen this week for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Hopefully, we're going to have a movie that we love on next Monday's episode. So you can join us then. You can watch us on our YouTube channel, or you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to drop us a line at cinema@gmail.com if you have a request or questions or a comment or how we got things wrong if we did. But if not, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.